Whitfield, and tonight we found out whether the future will be one of darkness after the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, decided to postpone its determination on Eskom's interim tariff increase. In English, it means that Eskom is not allowed to push the price of electricity up. And before you celebrate, it does mean that Eskom is going to have less money to invest in the network, and we could very well face a winter of discontent and load shedding. Let's test the theory. Joining me, Andrew Etzinger, Senior General Manager at Eskom. It was a cheap trick to pretend the lights were out. The lights are working perfectly for now, Andrew Etzinger. Yes. But here's NERSA, which says we need to postpone the increases. My heart has a little skip of happiness, but I also know there's a consequence to it.
Sure, Bruce. We will keep the lights on during this winter especially. So looking in the longer term, that is where our financial position becomes a little precarious. And the application we've made to the regulator to look at our past costs in relation to those that we planned for is in progress. But that would be a future consideration that would be
How big is
paid out in future. 225 billion is the shortfall over a 5-year period compared to what we had applied for through our multi-year price determination process compared to what we received. And the current application to our regulator through what we refer to as the regulatory clearing account actually doesn't deal with the 5 years. It deals with the period before the current 5-year period where there were ups and downs, and that balancing, that reconciliation is what NERSA are busy with at the moment. So that would also be paid out if there is any payout to Eskom, or up or down, by the way. The adjustment to the tariff would be made in the next couple of years. So it's not an immediate payment or windfall that would come Eskom's way.
One goes through the Eskom results, and Eskom makes a profit. It makes a tidy profit of a couple of billion rand, yes. Give or take. It should be in a sound financial position. But there is a requirement for investment. We've got power stations which are behind schedule. We've got a big problem there in terms of the ability of Eskom to keep up with demand. That 255 billion rand shortfall over 5 years, what happens if you don't get it?
If we don't get it, of course, this does impact our ability to raise cash, and does put the long-term sustainability of Eskom, particularly on the growth side, at risk, exactly as you say. So it is very important that we, on the one hand, are efficient. As a business, we have to cut our cloth according to our means. We have to become ruthless, and that's what we're busy with at the moment.
Because Eskom's been a very nice place to work for an awfully long time. It's a generous employer. It's provided housing. It's provided very generous wages. Brian Damas, the former chief executive, was saying it's the right thing to do. People who buy their electricity, however, and from time to time may find it shut off beyond their control, feel a little bit differently.
Exactly. So once again, I think we're entering a new era. We are dealing with significant financial constraints. Of the 225 billion shortfall, about 60 billion of that we've identified ways of addressing. So by cutting back on a number of business activities, being more efficient.
How do you cut 60 billion rands of expenses?
Well, it
suggests that Eskom has been wasting 60 billion rand a year in perpetuity in the past.
A lot of those activities are business activities which will be cut back, such as, for example, feasibility studies for new power stations. So this is not merely cutting back on the flowers for the boardroom. These are business activities which we would have normally undertaken, which we are cutting back. So it's a refocusing on our core business, making sure that any expenditure outside of that is reduced, even though those projects in many cases would have been very worthwhile. So it is a case
worthwhile but not essential, because the moment you say to me you're cutting back on feasibility for future projects, I go, hold on a second, yes. 5 years time we're still no better off in terms of the future of electricity provision. Exactly.
So it's a very fine balancing act we have to do to make sure that Eskom is sustainable in the long run, but at the same time meets the financial situation which we do have. We fully understand why tariffs are at 8% per year and not at 16% per year, but it does mean a very different Eskom, and that's what we're repositioning.
But it's the way it should be, surely. Eskom should be made to work for its money. It shouldn't be a free-for-all. There's a bottomless pit of consumer money. We simply get our 16% tariff increases. We don't need to think about the way in which the business runs. Surely this is healthy and good for the business of Eskom.
For Eskom to be efficient, we absolutely agree. As part of our price increase application, we do put forward benchmark information, which actually indicates that on an international comparative basis, Eskom is efficient. So there's fundamentally no massive problem with Eskom. Of course, there's always opportunity to improve, which is where we are. But in terms of that funding, the 225 billion, that is necessary to make sure that in the long run we replace the assets which we are currently running into the ground, our generation fleet, for example. So our ability to do that is compromised at the moment, and that is the concern we have.
When does Medupi come on stream? Because we've seen all the promises. We saw Mulusi Gigaba, when he was Minister of Public Enterprises, threaten hellfire and brimstone. We've seen the FD go, the Chief Executive go, no replacement found there.
Yes.
It feels like Eskom is not in control of its processes.
First generator at Medupi to come on stream by December of this year. So that is the current schedule. We're on track. Glad to say that the three issues which held us up on the labour issues, the boiler welding by Hitachi, as well as the control systems by Alstom,
the French, yeah.
All on track at the moment. So all systems go as we are at the moment.
Who's managing those processes? Because when you had a chief executive and a finance director, that's when they should have been completely managed. You don't have those people in place right now. Who's read the Riot Act to whom to get labour on side, to get the French on side, and to get the welders on side?
We have a very tough group executive for our capital program, our group capital division, run by Mr. Dan Morikani, and he cracks the whip. So
was he the guy in charge when things were falling apart as well?
No.
Okay,
no.
so he's a new broom, is he?
He's the new broom. He's taken over from Mr. Flaherty, Paul, who left a year ago or so. So, all systems go at the moment, and we're glad to say that in a couple of months' time we'll be having first power.
The PR comes out today, and it says that Eskom executives are not taking bonuses this year in recognition of the fact that we've not got our increases, and in recognition that things aren't going very well. That's very nice PR. Who says they deserve their bonuses in the first place?
The formulas to work out executive bonuses and remuneration are very tightly controlled, and all the calculations leading up to that will be released during our annual results announcements, which is coming up shortly. So I think that information will come through. But certainly I think there's a recognition that from a financial point of view, a company that is in close to distress, as we are at the moment, there's certainly an understanding that we can't pay our bonuses.
Was it a voluntary executive decision, or was it imposed upon the executive by the board?
No, it was not imposed by the board, but certainly no surprise, and to the executives that we are in a situation where we can't pay bonuses.
Well, what about the rest of the staff? I mean, Brian Damas, the former chief executive, would regularly berate people like me, annoyed as the lights go off, to say, what on earth are these people doing? And he would say, you've got to be nice to the people at Eskom because they have the power of life and death over you. These people work really hard, and if you make them cross, they may leave. There's a kid gloves approach to the staff at Eskom. Do they get their bonuses? Do they get continue to be treated nicely?
There will be modest bonuses paid out this year, but again, smaller bonuses than in prior years. And I think the trend is downwards, and I think that has been very clearly communicated.
Why do you need a new head office?
The head office at the moment is crumbling. It's breaking. The facade is unsafe.
Does it symbolise what's going on internally within the business?
I think the foundations are solid, and from that point of view, yes, there probably is a lot of similarity. So Eskom continues. The lights are burning. Our head office does need refurbishment. It hasn't been refurbished.
But the idea is to get a brand new head office. I mean, we see lots of parastatals. We see lots of government departments move into posher offices than the ministers who administer them sit in downtown Pretoria in the dregs of 1970s Verwoerdian architecture.
No new head office for Eskom. That's never been the plan. It's about refurbishing. It's about fixing the facade, which once again is crumbling and falling on people's heads. It's about an air conditioning system, which unfortunately is putting through asbestos through to our employees, and building environment, which is just frankly inefficient. The costs are out to tender at the moment, and we'll see what those tenders yield, but we've seen 500 million rand in the media, so it won't be anywhere near that.
Okay, 500 million is the ballpark figure. We know that no matter what the quote comes in, it'll come in at 100. We saw what happened at Nkandla. How do we have any assurance that any refurbishment of the Eskom head office doesn't go the same way as the Medupi quotes went? Medupi, which was meant to cost a fraction of what current estimates are. We could very well see that runaway sort of cost happen at head office as well.
We've got very strict procurement processes, and they'll be followed. All the results of it will go through.
It didn't work very well at Medupi, now did it? And that's the risk, isn't it?
Yeah, at Medupi, the cost overruns have really been as a result of the standing time. So we're dealing with those matters with our contractors at the moment, but it's not fundamentally a problem of the design of the project. Once again, it's the 9-month delay especially caused that standing time and those costs associated that we're dealing with on Medupi. Head office, very different situation. Of course, we'll be frugal. We do understand that all lies on us and that we need to be efficient, coming back to the original discussion on finances. So we'll do the barest minimum to make sure that the workplace for our employees is acceptable, and that it's a professional, presentable place.
Colin Machila is your acting chief executive. Like so many other government departments and government businesses, lots of acting chief executives in place. At what point does the board announce that they've found a successor to Brian Dames?
Our chairman has communicated that the succession process is in a very advanced stage, and we would expect that in one of these weeks we'll be hearing who our new chief executive will be. You didn't say one of these days, one of these weeks. Is it one of these 2 weeks, one of these 3 weeks, one of these 5 weeks? Because that then goes into months. Sure, we've been told during July. So as to when the new chief executive will take office would depend whether it's an internal appointment, in which case that could be immediate, or whether that chief executive would need a period to be released from their existing.
One has to assume it's external, otherwise the appointment would have been made already, or not?
Not to say. So we understand that there have been applications both from inside the organisation as well as outside.
So actually there are people who want to do this job. There have been applications. People have volunteered themselves. Brian Dames said this was the worst job in the country.
I think he said it was the toughest job in the country. I was sitting in on that interview, not the worst. I think
toughest. Okay. Okay. Translated, the worst job.
It is a tough job. Eskom is a massive company, and I think the biggest in South Africa, actually, if you take into account the contracting workforce, like 300 billion rand of capital that's being spent at the moment. So it is a massive business, massive challenges, and in view of the finances, etc. So it takes a special person to, I think, pick up the reins and to drive it. What
gives you the confidence that the lights will stay on through winter? We had I was going to say the shock cut off, but it wouldn't have been a shock because we were cut off because of wet coal earlier this year, and then we've had some very severe constraints. We've had consumers asked to cut back quite dramatically in the last couple of weeks because of downtime on some of the power stations that were being maintained and repaired. What gives you the confidence to say that it won't break?
Winter, a lot easier to keep the lights on, ironically, than summer because of the nature of the profile. We have a short, sharp peak, 6 to 7 p.m., and if we come through that, we're absolutely fine. So during the day, we have power coming out of our ears. No problem. It's just that 1 hour that we have to meet, and that means that a lot of our generation is basically idling for the rest of the time. So overall, we're actually in good shape. For that hour, yes, we are under pressure. If there is a cold front over the whole country, we all come home, put on our heaters, of course, we would be under pressure. But once again, just for an hour.
Andrew Etzinger with the second.